Yesterday we had a lovely day, and the forum that took place yesterday between 2 and 3:30 or so was quite informative. The feedback that I hear from everybody is that they were delighted, and you see the spirit now, that everybody's having more friends, networking with more people from their neighborhood, the region, country, continent, etc. And we are so blessed that you are doing that, because that's the fruits and that's the purpose of this meeting. The reunion is basically to connect with people that had immediate interaction with Swamiji. And today is a very special day because we are honored to have with us Professor JohnRossner and Reverend Dr. Professor Marilyn Rossner. Yes. They are the founders of the International Institute of Integral Human Sciences in Montreal since 1975 and the Spiritual Science Fellowship. It's thanks to them that I'm here with you today and have been since then. It's because of attending the first conference at Concordia University that I met them, and through that I met Swamiji, and the rest is history. So it's a very special couple, divine couple, that have married in 1974 in Montreal, and Swamiji was a participant in their wedding, and he blessed their wedding. And we are going to hear from both of them as direct witnesses of their lives with Swamiji. So I pass now the microphone to Swami Vishnudevananda, and then listen to them, and Srinivas after that. This is the panel discussion that we're having to start this meeting today.
Sahana Bonaktu Sahaviryam Garavavai Tejasvinavati Tamastu Mahavidvishavavahi Om Shanti 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 Om Peace 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Welcome to Father JohnRossner. Welcome to Marilyn Rossner. Man, you're really short. You can sit there, nobody will see you. Come on, sit up there.
Oh, really?
Oh, sit there.
No, I'm more comfortable.
All right, so. So we're very happy. Also, new people came between yesterday and this morning, so please welcome to all of you, okay? I have a small request before we begin for some of the people, that if there's a time possibility to share, some of them will have to share their own, some of the present people will have to share their own experience with Swami Vishnu. So I'm sure we'll try to make time so that everybody or whatever wants to say something about Swami Vishnu, your own personal experience, you're welcome to do so, okay? But let's start with the VIP here, and then we'll get time for you. Okay, guys? Thank you very much. Now I'll pass the word to Father JohnRossner. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om. Thank you, Swami Mahadev. I first met Swami Vishnu in 1962 when I was a young professor at Concordia University, which was then called Sir George Williams. I was asked by another professor if I'd like to come and meet a young Hindu Swami who was lecturing in her class on yoga, class on comparative religion. And I had another course to go to teach in ancient history and religion in another room, but I said I'd go and watch and meet him. I came to the door and looked through the glass to my surprise and saw standing on his head on the instructor's desk. Then he flipped over when he saw me come in the door with the entourage into the lotus position and laughed. That was the first impression I had of Swami Vishnu, and it was not an inaccurate one. He lectured for a brief time, and then I had... And I said, which Swamiji? She said, Swami Vishnudevananda. I said, oh, I met him 10 years ago. He didn't look any more like the illustrated book of yoga, they call me. She pulled over and she said, Swamiji, I'm trying to get a hold of you. This is John. We're getting married soon, and we'd like you for the wedding. I said, what does he do? He's an Anglican priest. He's a professor of comparative religion and science and culture at Ford University. And before he said anything else, he said, invite him to the Yoga Teachers Training Congress, the first one in Nassau, Bahamas. So I was invited. When I got there, I found every guru in North America in 1974, 72 to 74, that era. And swarms of people. And the whole program was amazing because scientists were being invited in to lecture on their thing in relation to yoga as well. And I thought to myself, well, this is exactly my cup of tea. But I was a young priest at the time wearing a white cassock among groups of Hindu swamis, Buddhist monks, Jewish rabbis, and every other religion on earth, except Christian, except for Ralph Abernathy, who succeeded Martin Luther King as head of the Christian fellowship in the South. So I said to myself, what am I going to do to say anything to impress this crowd? But I said, we once had a religious tradition like yours in the West. We somehow lost it. I've come here to learn what you know so that we can recover it. And that got a tremendous response. Probably the first sign of humility they found from a Western religionist. At any rate, it went well, and I got invited again and again. We had many programs with Swami Vishnu when we learned our common interests in science and spirituality and world religions. He invited us to India in 1970, what was it, 7. An all-India tour, yoga and psychic discoveries. We were sitting in the park in Bangalore, and there were 10,000 people in the park, which was lighted up with little lanterns all around in a loudspeaker. There were Vedic priests singing and chanting, the Swamis on the platform. Me in a white cassock, an astronaut, Edgar Mitchell from the Apollo 14 mission, who had sent a message by telepathy, which was picked up at 4 points on Earth, unbeknownst to NASA. And he was able to report that that was a successful experiment while he was circling the moon from space. Edgar Mitchell in an astronaut suit, minus the helmet, of course, because the temperature wouldn't allow that. Me in a white cassock and Swamiji in an orange robe. And then all the Vedic priests and everybody else wandering around and singing and chanting and jumping. When I finished giving my presentation, I noticed sitting over in the right-hand area, which was set aside on the grass for people who needed chairs, namely VIPs, he said, we want to invite you people who bring scientists and scholars, as well as spiritual people to the west, from the west to the east. Our young people will listen to people who know science, but they won't listen to us because we're too old and we're religionists. But when you combine the two, you've got something. So as a result of that, we established, or he established with us, the All-India chapter of the International Institute of Heavenly Sciences. Since then, we've had programs in Russia during Perestroika and Glasnost, and other countries in the world, north and south. And Marilyn has gone all over the world lecturing in these places and demonstrating. This was the introduction to Swami Vishnu. So from the beginning, we struck it off. Now, I forgot to mention that with Swami Vishnu, before the wedding, coming into our house, and then at the cathedral, Christ Church Anglican Cathedral in Montreal, where the wedding took place, with about 300 people present, was a young, thin Swami in an orange robe named Swami Vishnudevananda. So he was there from the beginning of this act, so to speak. And they were planning a garlanding ceremony. Now, at the cathedral itself, they were seated in the sanctuary in the front. The Anglican bishop in his cope and mitre, with a Roman Catholic chaplain, unheard of yet in those days, on his left. followed by a Greek Orthodox priest who was swinging an incense pot and censing everybody, including the Swamis. A Syrian Orthodox priest who was garlanding the bride with a wreath of flowers. And every other religion on the planet was represented there. Marilyn's brother's bar mitzvah photographer happened to be the one she hired for the wedding. He came up afterwards and said, "Now, I know you're a Jewish family. What religion was this anyway?" And I said, "Yes, that was it." And it's been that way ever since. Because all of the great religions of the world are speaking their own language, which is good language for their own people. But it doesn't correspond to anything that's known much outside of their tradition. And especially when it comes to the culture of science and spirituality. And those who begin to do this are rare. So Dr. Devakar's invitation to do this in India was the first sign of approval that we got. But Swami Vishnu was having large conferences in Bangalore, in Nassau, and Montreal here, on yoga and psychic discoveries, in which he was bringing parallels to psychology and psychiatry, and yoga, which was a very important thing to do. And our institute was beginning to gather some of the leaders in the world in those subjects. We had as our fellows of the institute Wilder Penfield, a surgeon who removed a portion of the brain of a man who was functioning barely, so that he wouldn't die. The normal functions of the body that were covered by that function would be gone forever, it was thought. But Dr. Penfield noticed that another portion of the brain gradually began to take over the portion of the missing portion. And somehow there was a ghost in the machine, which was someone else's term for what he was discovering. He called me up and told me about this. And I said, of course, this is the astral brain in the multi-layered body in the yogic tradition of ancient India. And it's found in other cultures too in the East. And he became very interested. And he became a fellow and founding member of the Institute, Wilder Penfield. Then we had Hans Selye, who discovered that stress could destroy rats, could kill them, when it was believed by medicine in the 1970s, generally, that it couldn't have any effect on us. Stress would not kill us. These were the kinds of things that Swami Vishnu and I were involved in 1970s. And we had Shishal Kumar Acharya, who was a Jain master who came to the West, who established an NGO at the UN like we did, to study these things. And all of these events were going on way ahead of their time in the 1970s and 80s. And by the 1980s, we moved on to Russia when Gorbachev wanted to open up to psychiatry in the West, and Marilyn had been teaching in psychiatry and children's therapies. I offered a cup of coffee to a man in Madras when we were invited by Dr. Subramanian, who was the head of the Madras Medical College at the time, a woman doctor. And we were invited to come. And I offered a cup of coffee. A good kindness, you see, it always helps. To an elderly man by helping him down the steps to a marquee like this in the garden in the hotel in India, where the conference was held in Madras, now Chennai, I think. At any rate, by kindly befriending this old gentleman, I found out that he was head of the Crimea Medical Institute in the Soviet Union. And on the way back in, Marilyn came running up with Swami Vishnu, and he said to Marilyn, "Da, I want to invite you to Soviet Union to